So anyway, it was time now for our main event of the evening. For the AEW World title, hopefully what was going to be the coronation of a new superstar in the business, MJF, when he challenged Plumber Moxley. It was Plumber versus Prodigy is what it was here in this match. And this, again, MJF is such a great talent, but this bizarro world that they have created of these AEW fans, the best heel in the business is cheered out of the building like a conquering hero. And Plumber Moxley, supposed to be the babyface, is booed like Mussolini during World War II. And this is the position they put themselves in by the fans by now have figured out that nobody's in charge. There's no structure here. There was never a plan. There wasn't a plan for the roster. There was plans in Tony's mind that he has saved ever since he was a teenager booking an E-Fed, whatever the fuck that may be. And they're just doing their own thing now. And because and they're cheering for people that they consider are talented, who have usually been people that have been jacked around in this company, in favor of people who aren't talented but who are related, or who aren't talented but are friends. So now the babyface champion comes to get booed out of the building against the devil himself, who's a popular hero, but at least we better see what we wanted to see. So we had to sit through this match to get it. Your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I have a question for you about that. That's why I'm jumping in, because I was thinking this while I was watching it. Now, obviously, this crowd was going to just do what it wanted. They were cheering for MJF. They were booing Moxley. Now, we saw how Moxley seemed to relish this, and he got into it with the crowd, and he's playing back and forth. In your opinion, in his position, and I know he's not your favorite guy, but just if you're giving him guidance, let's say, on this, was that the right thing to do, or should he have completely no-sold what the crowd was doing and continued, trying to work as the babyface of the match?
There's a middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and there's a middle ground between no selling and ignoring the crowd and actively giving them double fingers and saying, fuck you. And in that situation, see, here's the thing. What Moxley did was what Moxley wanted to do. He knew he was going to get booed out of the building because of the groundswell of support for MJF, because the people wanted to see MJF and Punk. This should have been MJF and Punk. It would have been a much better match if it had been MJF and Punk. MJF would have been coronated as a new champion the right way if it was Punk. But instead, they got Moxley. So they wanted to cheer for MJF, and Moxley knew that he was going to get booed out of the building, and he took the advantage of that to say, well, I'm going to go with it, so that what he could do was he could not only be an obnoxious heel to the people that were booing him, but also he could fucking basically take the majority of this match and not worry about trying to make MJF look like a competitor on his level. He was going to beat the shit out of him through most of it. And the excuse that he's going to use afterwards, if anybody questions him, was, well, I was going with it because I was a heel. He knew exactly what he was doing. He either didn't want to or can't make a guy in his match. Even though they didn't do so much on the floor as they always do in a Moxley match, this was Moxley. Visually, it looked like a young WWE superstar on an indie show in an outlaw guy's hometown working with the promoter. That's what it looked like. Moxley looks like shit. MJF looks incredible. And whether it was Moxley would laying the chops in, at one point they were out on the floor. MJF spits a drink in Moxley's eyes. The crowd pops for it. MJF tries to take over, but Moxley won't sell anything because he's concentrating on getting himself over as a heel, and he probably had a bit of boo-boo job face going into this thing, and he wasn't concentrating on making MJF athletically, physically as a competitor on his level. He kept going for shoot holds like he's a noted Gracie family member. I never critique MJF. I'm going to do it now. MJF fired up at one point with a series of right jabs and right-footed stomps that he should never, ever, ever do again. Because it looked fucking hokey as goddamn, I don't know what. Hey, it got me so frazzled I can't form a cogent simile. And that's a point where it got awkward because MJF was now doing babyface stuff. And even the people that had been cheering him like, Moses parted the Red Sea, it looks awkward when MJF is running the guy's head in the turnbuckle over and over, especially because Moxley takes him like shit. Or when he's doing the Dusty Rhodes fucking jabs. We don't want to see that from MJF. And he was put in that position, but also the jabs looked horrible.
And it reminded me a little bit of also what The Rock used to do as a face, the type of like repeated punches and stomps that he would do. I think maybe if I could...
They didn't look that good.
No, they didn't. And I know he was never praised for them either. But I think maybe they were trying to get across or get the crowd to think, okay, MJF is totally a babyface now. He's a good guy, because they were trying to, shock them in the end, which again, to me, I'm watching it going, all right, I can tell by now where they're going from a million miles away. Not that that's a bad thing. Sometimes the obvious thing is the thing to do, but having Regal turn and then having MJF fool everybody and he's really the devil and all that stuff. But I'm watching it going, how is this going to play when the audience loves him? They're eating out of his hand. They are not going to turn on him when this turn happens. And I was right, because as great as the match was, and as great as MJF was at least, and getting it over and all that stuff, the audience still did not have the reaction that I think that they were hoping they were going to have.
Well, if they thought they were going to get any other reaction, they were crazy. They got the exact reaction they were going to get. And here's the thing. You mentioned that, well, they making him think he's a full-fledged babyface for the turn coming up. Does a full-fledged babyface throw rotten-looking jabs that the heel doesn't sell and then takes back over on him? Or does if they wanted to portray in a visual way MJF being the babyface, then wouldn't Moxley get on him and start punching him in the head, and MJF start bowing up and hulking up and giving that fucking, oh, and Moxley backing up like, oh? Well, they would if they wanted MJF to look like a big babyface, but that would also require Moxley to actually back up from somebody and fucking him to allow MJF to no-sell some of his shit like he was no-selling MJF. So that's why they didn't do that. But no, this was just a bad spot. And here's another thing, which was a tell, as they say, a tip. MJF going to fire the crowd up a few times here at the go-home stretch. And I mentioned that he did that on that one promo that he did when he came back on television several weeks ago after the hiatus he took, and they were cheering everything he said, and he kept yelling and trying too hard and going to them and knocking them to make them, and they just cheered him more. He wasn't comfortable then being cheered, and he was trying too hard to get them to boo him, and they weren't going to do it anyway. Well, right in the closing part of this, MJF went to firing up the crowd several times, even if it wasn't like smiling babyface cheer for me. It's like, whatever. He was still trying to fire him up because he heard at that point that this crowd ought to be hotter for that match or for his big match than they were at that point. And he was trying to artificially get him into it because he was uncomfortable about it. I could see it. But the thing is, Moxley didn't give him the match that those people would be hot for at that period of time. They liked MJF. They were waiting to see MJF win, but they weren't with every part of the match because it was fucking Moxley. And it's the same goddamn shit he always does. And he was actually not even doing it with as much oomph as he normally does because I think he had boo-boo job face. And then MJF he goes out and he brings a table to ringside. And that took so much time that he gets back in the ring and Moxley hit a cutter. And Moxley did the stomps that looked like shit and probably hurt. And they teased falling off the apron onto the table. But then it was supposed to be that MJF was going to pick Moxley up for a tombstone pile driver on the apron, which he did do. But as Moxley was spinning up into it, his left foot slipped off the apron and Max had to power that son of a bitch up. Jesus Christ, I'm sure his balls were up in his watch pocket. But he got it, and then MJF sold the knee, which was brilliant. But then Moxley had to give MJF a pile driver off the apron through the table. And that wasn't the finish. Of course, MJF beat the count in. So at that point, Moxley, I think for the first time ever, actually kicked into high gear. His somas must have worn off. And he started working the leg with some fucking aggression. Not the neck that he just tried to break by pile driving a guy off the apron through a table to a concrete floor. Now he's working the leg immediately after that, but still it was something. And MJF sold the figure 4 great. And then they did some more contrived fighting on the top turnbuckle, and then Moxley hit a klutzy DDT off the top rope. It looked like it may have potentially killed MJF. And they did the yay boo in the middle as they're going home. And now Moxley is the baby face in this, because not for the people. But again, if you notice, you say, well, they wanted to make MJF look like a big baby face. When's the last time the baby face lost the yay boo? Ever? Well, in this case, Moxley suddenly decides, well, I can't lose the yay boo to MJF. So now suddenly he's the baby face, and he beats him down with the forearms and then hits the ropes, and MJF pulls the referee into Moxley, and both of them go down.
Yeah, well, they did start to telegraph the turn a little bit towards the end of the match. Like, I also noticed when they did the spot where MJF is in the submission hold with the referee out and he's tapping. I mean, that's a total heel spot to do, where, you know, he's tapping out as if he would have lost if the referee was only there to make the call.
Well, so, you know what that was, don't you?
Oh yeah.
That was some of Mama Jobber's soothing salve. See, that's when you tell Moxley, well, you're going to do the job, but I tell you what, while the referee's down, you get to hold on him, and he's going to tap like Jose Greco. And so you really won. That's some of that Mama Jobber's soothing salve. It makes the fucking burn from the job go a little easier. But that's what happened. He knocks the referee down. Moxley gets MJF gets the ring, and Regal comes to ringside and put that down. And then Moxley gets a choke, and MJF kicks off the turnbuckle, and their second ref comes in and counts it. Moxley gets choke again, and they wipe out the second referee, and the first referee comes back up. Moxley gets choke again, and MJF taps, but the referee hadn't seen it yet. So Moxley goes to get the referee, and Regal then pitches the knucks into MJF. And the people saw that, and that's where they blew. 'Cause now it all becomes clear. And they were going to cheer MJF winning the title regardless, because they wanted to see it. Because they wanted to see it. They want to see something new and fresh, and they knew they were going to get that eventually with Punk and MJF, and now there's no Punk, so let's just get it with MJF. I don't think there's been a clamor for Moxley to be the champion all these times, interim champion, regular champion, whatever the fuck. But when Regal slipped the knucks in, at least that made part of the puzzle become clear. And boom, and now MJF wins. He's the champion. I thought MJF deserved a much better match. Moxley is just not up to something like this, and I don't think he had his heart in it. But now, again, people were talking about Twinkle Toes and Don Fallis as a Heenan-Bockwinkel combination. If they can keep Regal around, then this is your Heenan-Bockwinkel combination, MJF and fucking William Regal, and they can get some fucking heat. And eventually, I know right now MJF is the belle of the ball. If they find a baby face that has the appeal of Punk, they don't have one right now. Bryan Danielson has a ton of appeal, but he's not a forceful enough personality to take charge of his own booking, apparently, and he's kind of twisted in the wind now. But if they found a really popular babyface, MJF can be a mega heel just like that because he's that good, and they haven't ruined anything with making him a milquetoast, fucking nice guy. I've realized I've done wrong. I'm so sorry. They haven't done that to him. So that could still happen. But first they got to find a babyface anybody gives a shit about, not the goofiness of they like Kenny, they like Matt and Nick. I'm talking about a real babyface they look up to and respect and want to pay to see. Just one more thing. That's the thing. They were going to get this reaction regardless, but at least now, if there's a path forward that gets Moxley out of the title picture and somebody else in it, then maybe they can stir something up here at the top of the card. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think Regal with MJF is a great move. I think, Regal, everything he touches is gold as far as I'm concerned. He's one of the greatest at pretty much everything, including comedy. I mean, he's one of the funniest. You wouldn't think he would be as funny as he is. He has the reputation for being such a great wrestler and a serious worker and all that stuff. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is he could do it all, but we haven't seen him in this kind of a role in the longest time, where he's become this kind of fatherly figure that fans love, and especially smart fans. He's this benevolent sort of guy that you shouldn't fuck with, but he's so beloved that people forget what a great heel he is. And I think him and MJF could work magic together.
Now, let me ask you, you may know about being the executive news director of the Wrestling News. You probably keep an eye on things like this. How long has William Regal been there? When did he come in?
It has not been that terribly long of a time. I want to say it was right around the time that they were having all those purges when Triple H was kind of on the outs. So maybe the early part of this year. I mean, I could be completely off base, but I want to say the spring of this year.
Okay, well, and that sounds about right. But I get where I'm going with that is, has anybody ever announced how long he signed for? Has anybody ever announced what length of contract he has? Because the one thing that's going to throw a monkey wrench into this is anybody out there crazy enough to think that Triple H, the first phone call that he made or tried to make when he got his position back again, was to one of his right-hand men, William Regal? He's brought we even said when they fired Regal, what the fuck? This is a sign they're really kicking Triple H in the nuts. I can't, with everybody else, Triple H, he brought back Top Dollar, the manatee in a sweatshirt. So you think he's not going to try to bring back Regal? So how long was if it was for a year, it may be almost up. If it's for 2 years, they've got time to run with this thing.
Right. And no offense to Road Dogg at all, but if Triple H has brought him back, he most definitely is at least trying to bring Regal back. And I mean,
I think the Top Dollar comparison pretty much blew Road Dogg out of the water.
But I say it because Top Dollar is in the ring, but Road Dogg he brought back in sort of a behind the scenes capacity. And I think with Regal, he has to be. I mean, those guys have always been as thick as thieves. And I think that the reason that he didn't immediately go back has to speak to the fact that he signed up to some type of a deal that hasn't expired yet. And Regal is the kind of an honorable guy that's going to honor the deal. He's not going to try to get out of it or try and pull some kind of thing but I would agree for sure that at this point, he's got to be just counting the days down until he can go back there, truly.
Well, and that's the thing is, we talked about at the time Regal came in, why in the world is this guy not the commissioner / authority figure / promotional spokesperson on camera? Because that's what he does so well, and Tony does it so shittily. But also, I said, why is this guy not the head trainer of a new training program? Because, my God, he's had a hand in training some of the best talent of the last 20 years or whatever. But also, we made mention, who better than Canyon? But who better than William Regal to know when contracts, when he came to AEW, he had knowledge when contracts for young talent in NXT and developmental, et cetera, when they'd be up and who those people were you need to be paying attention to and keeping an eye on. And we said, I wonder whether, Regal will be pissed off enough at what Vince has done to him to fucking, try to cause some shit. Well, but then all of a sudden Triple H takes back over. Now his friend is in charge again, and now you have to think the other thing. Now Triple H has got to go, well, there's William Regal, my bosom buddy, and a guy who obviously knows enough about the wrestling business to know that he's made a drastic mistake in where he has accepted a job, and I want him back. But more importantly, he knows all these guys. He's been talking to them. They've spilled their guts to him. So now Triple H will know exactly what's going on. So I don't know. Anyway, that was Full Gear, and that was the crowning of the new generational talent as champion in AEW. And God, just like the Acclaimed were let down by their opponents, MJF was let down by his opponent. Everybody on this program was let down by the booking of Tony Khan and his Adderall-riddled fucking complete lack of a train of thought or attention to detail.